Captain Tom Miller stood tall on the observation deck of Earth's orbital recycling station. His worn blue uniform had seen better days, but so had most things humans use these days. Through the large viewing window, he watched as the sleek, purple-silver ship of the Valorian delegation approached. The alien vessel gleamed in the sunlight, not a scratch on its perfect hull. "They're here," said Officer Ben, standing beside Tom. "First contact with the Valorians, and they want to see our trash heap." He shook his head. "It's not a trash heap," Tom said firmly. "This station processes more vital materials than any facility on Earth." He believed in humanity's recycling efforts. He had to. Earth had used up most of its easy-to-reach resources decades ago. The docking tube connected with a soft hiss. Tom straightened his back and put on his best smile. "Remember, everyone, these aliens control 12 star systems. Be polite." When the airlock opened, Tom's first thought was that the Valorians looked like tall blue crabs walking on two legs. The leader, Admiral Crix, stood nearly 7 feet tall with a hard shell that shimmered with embedded lights. 4 smaller Valorians followed behind him, each carrying what looked like weapons. "Welcome to Mars Orbital Recycling Station 7, Tom said, extending a hand before remembering the briefing. Valorians didn't shake hands. He quickly dropped his arm. Admiral Crix's large compound eyes scanned the docking bay. "Your transmission said this was a key defense installation." His voice came through a translator device on his chest, sounding metallic and cold. "It is," Tom answered. "Resource management is the backbone of Earth's defense strategy." The Admiral made a clicking sound. The translator didn't catch it, but Tom sensed it wasn't respectful. "Show us," Crix commanded. For the next hour, Tom led the aliens through the station. He showed them the sorting areas where robots separated different types of metals. He explained the melting facilities that could reshape old satellite parts into new components. He proudly demonstrated how old computer systems were taken apart, their valuable elements extracted for reuse. The Valorians followed silently, their claw-like appendages occasionally touching the walls or equipment. Their body language was hard to read, but Tom didn't need alien expression lessons to see they weren't impressed. The tour reached the large central processing chamber, the heart of the station. Here, hundreds of small drones moved through a massive collection of floating space debris, old satellites, broken ship parts, and scraps from past space missions filled the zero-gravity chamber. "This is our pride and joy," Tom explained. "Earth collects all space debris and brings it here. Nothing goes to waste." Admiral Crix stepped forward, his hard shell reflecting the blinking lights of the drones. "You collect garbage?" he asked. The translator couldn't convey tone, but the Admiral's posture showed clear disgust. "We recycle and repurpose," Tom corrected gently. "Earth has limited resources. We've learned to make the most of what we have." The Admiral turned to his companions. They clicked and chittered among themselves for a few moments. Then Crix faced Tom again. "My species has conquered worlds rich with minerals and metals. When we need something, we take it." He gestured at the floating junk. "This is primitive, like watching animals build nests from fallen branches." Tom felt his face grow hot, but he kept his voice steady. "Necessity has made us innovative. Some of our best technologies came from finding new uses for old things." Indeed. Crix moved to a nearby workstation where Dr. Linda Reed, the station's chief engineer, was monitoring the drones. The alien's large eyes studied the screen. "What is happening here?" Linda looked to Tom, who nodded for her to explain. "These are nanites," she said, pointing to microscopic images on her screen. "Tiny robots that can break down materials at the molecular level and rebuild them into new forms. My team developed them to handle the most complex recycling tasks." Nanites. For the first time, the Admiral seemed genuinely interested. "Show me." Linda pressed a few buttons, and a small chamber lit up beside her workstation. Inside, A broken piece of metal slowly dissolved into a gray puddle, then reformed into a perfect cube. The nanites can be programmed to create almost anything, as long as the base materials are available. Linda explained. Admiral Crix watched the demonstration without comment. Then he turned away. Interesting toy, but it doesn't change my assessment. He faced Tom directly. Your species has reached the level where you can travel your own solar system, but no further. You are stuck here, playing with your scraps while the rest of the galaxy advances. Tom wanted to argue but held his tongue. Making the aliens angry wouldn't help Earth. As they returned to the docking bay, Admiral Crix delivered his real message. The Valorian Empire requires resources from all habitable systems. Your world has been assessed. You will prepare a tribute of rare Earth elements, uranium, and water ice. 1 Earth month to comply. Tom stopped walking. Tribute? We're struggling with our own resource needs. We can't. 1 month. Crix interrupted. Or we will take what we need by force. He gestured toward the viewing window, where more Valorian ships were becoming visible. Our fleet stands ready beyond your Jupiter. It has conquered 12 systems before yours. We could negotiate a trade agreement, Tom suggested quickly. A partnership. Admiral Crix made that clicking sound again. Partnership. With garbage collectors. The other Valorians chittered, and this time Tom was certain it was laughter. Prepare your tribute, human. 1 month. The aliens returned to their ship. Tom and his crew watched in silence as the gleaming vessel undocked and moved away from the station. Officer Ben came to stand beside him. What do we do now, Captain? Tom stared at the retreating alien ship, his mind racing. Earth had no fleet that could match what he glimpsed beyond Jupiter. They had no superweapons or advanced shields. All they had were recycling stations, clever engineers, and a whole lot of space junk. Now, he said quietly, we need to talk to Dr. Reed about her nanites, and we need to gather every piece of scrap metal in the solar system. Through the window, Jupiter glowed in the distance, with tiny dots of light, the Valorian fleet, hovering like stars that promised death instead of light. The room fell silent when Captain Tom Miller finished speaking. 20 of Earth's top leaders sat around the large round table in the United Earth Defense Council chamber. Maps of the solar system glowed on the walls, with red dots marking the Valorian fleet's position near Jupiter. 1 month, General Adams said, breaking the silence. His gray hair was cut short, and deep lines marked his face. They give us 1 month before they attack. Can we evacuate? Asked someone else. To where? Tom replied. The Valorians control 12 systems. They have ships that can reach anywhere humans can go. Council President Maria Lopes stood up. Her dark eyes moved from face to face. We cannot give them what they want. Earth's resources are already stretched thin. And from what Captain Miller reported, I doubt they would stop at 1 tribute. Everyone nodded. The Valorians clearly saw humans as primitives to be used, not equals to trade with. What about weapons? Asked General Adams. Our orbital defense platforms would be like throwing rocks at a tank, Tom cut in. I saw their ships up close. Their technology is far beyond ours. The room grew quiet again. The situation seemed hopeless. Then the door opened, and Dr. Linda Reed hurried in. She carried a small metal box and wore her lab coat over wrinkled clothes. Her curly hair was tied back messily, like she hadn't slept. Sorry I'm late, she said. I was testing a theory. President Lopes nodded to her. Dr. Reed, we heard you were present during the Valorian visit. Do you have anything to add to Captain Miller's report? Linda placed her metal box on the table. I have a possible solution. She opened the box, revealing a small cube of gray material that seemed to shift and move slightly. This is a sample of my advanced nanite colony. The garbage processors? Asked Council Member Jack Parker with a frown. He was the youngest person in the room, always dressed in expensive suits. How will trash robots help us fight aliens? Linda's eyes flashed with annoyance. They're not trash robots. They're a programmable, self-replicating swarm of microscopic machines that can break down and rebuild materials at the molecular level. She pressed a button on the box. The gray cube melted, flowed around the container, then reformed into a perfect sphere. I've been developing this technology for 10 years, Linda continued. These nanites can transform any material into almost any structure, as long as they have the right elements to work with. Tom leaned forward. Like building weapons from space junk. Linda nodded. Exactly. The Valorians saw a demonstration but didn't understand its potential. These aren't just recycling tools. They're builders that can create almost anything if given the right instructions. She tapped another button. The sphere sprouted tiny legs and crawled around the box. They can be programmed for complex tasks and can adapt to new challenges. Most importantly, they can self-replicate using available materials. You want to build a fleet from garbage, Jack Parker said with disbelief. Not garbage, Linda corrected. Resources. The solar system is full of materials we can use. Old satellites, space station parts, asteroids. The nanites can transform them all. General Adams looked skeptical. Even if this works, how would these junk ships stand against Valorian technology? Linda smiled. Because of how the nanites work, they don't just build static objects. They remain active within the structure, constantly repairing and improving it. If part of a ship gets damaged, the nanites will try to fix it. Like healing? Asked President Lopez. Something like that, Linda agreed. And they learn. Each time they encounter new materials or problems, they adapt. The more Valorian technology they encounter, the better they'll become at countering it. Tom stood up, excitement in his voice. And we have an advantage the Valorians don't expect. They think we're primitive garbage collectors. They won't see this coming. Jack Parker still looked doubtful. You want to bet humanity's survival on a bunch of microscopic robots eating our garbage. Not eating it, Linda corrected. Transforming it. And yes, that's exactly what I'm proposing. President Lopes studied the nanites, which had now formed a tiny pyramid. How quickly can these build ships? That's the challenge, Linda admitted. My current nanite colonies are small. We'd need billions more. And we'd need to program them with designs for space vessels, weapons, shields, everything a fleet needs. How long would that take? General Adams asked. Linda thought for a moment. 2 weeks to produce enough nanites, another week to program and deploy them. That leaves us just 1 week before the Valorian deadline. Cutting it close, Tom said. Too close, Jack argued. We should try to negotiate, buy more time. President Lopes shook her head. The Valorians made their opinion of us clear. They see us as primitives, not worth respecting. She looked at Linda. This is our best option. Can you do it, Doctor? Linda closed her box of nanites. I'll need resources. Every scientist who's worked on nanotech. Full access to all recycling stations. And we need to gather as much space debris as possible near Mars, where my main lab is located. You'll have everything you need, President Lopes promised. She turned to the others. This stays secret. If the Valorians learn what we're planning, they might attack early. As the meeting ended, Tom approached Linda in the hallway. Do you really think this can work? He asked quietly. Linda's confident smile faded slightly. It has to, she whispered. It's all we've got. As they walked away, the small metal box under Linda's arm hummed softly. Inside, the nanites continued to move and shift, unaware that the fate of humanity would soon rest on their microscopic shoulders. In space, beyond Jupiter's orbit, Admiral Crix watched Earth through powerful telescopes. He saw only a blue planet with primitive satellites and stations. He had no idea that from humanity's desperation, a plan was forming. A plan that would transform the very junk he had mocked into Earth's salvation. Hours passed. The debris fields around Mars, Earth, and at key points throughout the solar system seemed to dissolve into swirling clouds of material. The Valorian observers reported the strange phenomenon to Admiral Crix. "The humans appear to be destroying their own technology," Officer Drell reported. "Their junk is disintegrating." Admiral Crix studied the images with his compound eyes. "Perhaps a ceremonial destruction before surrender," he suggested, "or a failed weapon test." He didn't sound concerned. But Linda and her team watched with growing excitement as the nanites completed their initial work. The broken-down materials didn't stay as clouds for long. Slowly, new shapes began to form. "Assembly phase has begun," Linda announced, her voice tight with tension. "First structures are taking shape." Near Mars, the largest collection of materials was transforming into something massive. What had been random pieces of satellites, station parts, and old ships was becoming a single, cohesive structure. Its shape was unlike any vessel humans had built before. No sharp edges or obvious sections, but a smooth, flowing design that seemed almost organic. "That's not in the programming," whispered one of Linda's assistants. "We gave them basic ship designs. But this..." Linda smiled. "They're adapting. The nanites are finding more efficient shapes than what we provided." She pointed to her screen. "Look, they're incorporating solar collection into the hull itself instead of using separate panels." Across the solar system, the pattern repeated. Smaller collections of junk transformed into smaller vessels of varying designs. Some were clearly built for speed, others for defense. All shared the same smooth, flowing appearance of the flagship forming near Mars. When Officer Drell brought the latest images to Admiral Crix, the Valorian commander finally showed concern. "What are these structures?" he demanded. "Unknown, Admiral," Drell admitted. "They appear to be ships of some kind, but unlike any human design we studied." "Ships?" Crix clicked his claws in disbelief. "Made from their garbage. Impossible." But as they watched, the first of the new vessels began to move. Near Earth's moon, a sleek silver craft the size of a small destroyer powered up and began a careful flight path. Tom's voice crackled over the common frequency used by all human ships. "Test vessel Reclaimer 1 is operational. All systems functioning at 85% capacity and rising." On his command ship, Tom could hardly believe what he was seeing. The vessel moved with grace and precision that exceeded anything in Earth's fleet. His sensors showed energy readings far higher than should be possible from recycled components. "Linda," he called over a private channel, "what have your nanites done?" In her lab, Linda watched the readings with a mix of pride and amazement. "They've exceeded all expectations. The ships are drawing power directly from solar radiation, and they're still evolving. The nanites continue to refine and improve the structures." "Will they follow our commands?" Tom asked, the crucial question. Linda nodded. "Yes. Basic control systems are accepting human operators, but they'll also have some autonomous functions for rapid response and adaptation." Across the solar system, more of the new vessels activated. A fleet was forming, not as large as the Valorian Armada, but growing by the hour as more debris was transformed. Admiral Crix slammed his claw against his command console. "Alert the fleet. The humans have deployed weapons." He turned to Officer Drell. "How did they hide this technology from us?" Drell had no answer. The Valorians had dismissed humanity as primitive garbage collectors. Now, that garbage was becoming the one thing the aliens hadn't expected: a fighting chance. 1 week remained before the Valorian deadline. Earth's newly formed fleet gathered in orbit around Mars, hidden from direct view of the alien armada. The ships, if they could be called that, looked nothing like traditional human vessels. They had smooth, flowing lines that shifted slightly as the nanites continued to refine their structures. Captain Tom Miller stood on the bridge of the largest vessel, now named Phoenix. Once a collection of space station modules and satellite parts, it was now a powerful warship nearly half a mile long. "All systems check complete," reported Officer Ben from a control station that had formed itself around him. "Weapons at full capacity." Shields holding at 98%. Tom nodded, still amazed at how the nanite-built ship responded to human commands while continuing to improve itself. What's our fleet status? 267 vessels operational, Ben answered, ranging from this flagship down to fighter-sized craft. All crewed and ready. It was an impressive number, built in just 2 weeks from space junk. But the Valorian fleet still outnumbered them 3-1, with technology that had conquered 12 star systems. It's time, Tom said. He opened a channel to all ships. This is Captain Miller. Today we defend not just Earth, but humanity's right to exist as free people. The Valorians think us primitive. They mocked our recycling efforts. Now those same efforts will be our strength. He paused. Begin Operation Scraffheap. Across the solar system, the human fleet moved into position. Some ships remained near Earth as the last line of defense. The main battle group, led by Tom, headed toward Jupiter, where the Valorian fleet waited. On the Valorian command ship, Admiral Crix received reports of the approaching human vessels. Their deadline isn't for another 7 days, he said, surprised. Are they attacking or surrendering? Officer Drell studied the sensor readings. Difficult to determine, Admiral. These ships match no known human designs. They appear to be constructed from the debris they were collecting. Crix's compound eyes narrowed. They built a battle fleet from garbage. He made a clicking sound of disbelief. Open a channel to their lid vessel. Tom's face appeared on the Valorian view screen. The human looked calm, determined. Captain Miller, Crix began, your deadline for tribute has not yet arrived. Explain your approach. We're not bringing tribute, Admiral, Tom replied. We're bringing a message. Earth is not yours to harvest. Turn your fleet around and leave our system. Crix's mandibles clicked rapidly, the Valorian equivalent of laughter. You believe your hastily built junk ships can stand against the might of the Valorian Empire. We've conquered 12 systems with this fleet. We prefer the term resourceful, Admiral. Tom's expression didn't change. This is your only warning. The screen went dark. Crix turned to his weapons officer. Destroy their lead vessel. Show them the consequence of defiance. The Valorian flagship fired its main weapon, a powerful energy beam that could cut through conventional ship armor like paper. The beam struck the Phoenix directly. On the human ship's bridge, Tom braced for impact. The vessel shuddered, and warning lights flashed across control panels. Direct hit to forward section, Ben called out. Shield integrity at 72%. Damage to outer hull layers. But the Phoenix didn't explode. It didn't break apart. Instead, the damaged section of the hull began to ripple and flow, the nanites already repairing the damage. Return fire, Tom ordered. The Phoenix fired energy weapons of its own. Technology the nanites had developed based partly on human designs and partly on their own evolution. The beam struck a Valorian cruiser, causing significant damage to its weapon systems. Full attack pattern, Tom commanded. All ships engage. The battle erupted across the space near Jupiter. Valorian vessels fired devastating weapons that would have destroyed normal human ships instantly. But the nanite vessels responded differently. When hit, they didn't simply explode. The nanites fought to maintain structural integrity, learning from each attack and reconfiguring to better withstand the next blast. In her lab on Mars, Dr. Linda Reed monitored the battle through data feeds. Amazing, she whispered as she watched the nanites adapt in real time. They're evolving their defense strategies with each hit. We're still taking losses, reported her assistant. On the screens, several smaller human vessels had been overwhelmed by concentrated Valorian fire. Yes, but watch. Linda pointed to the debris from a destroyed human ship. The cloud of materials wasn't dispersing as normal space debris would. Instead, it was moving with purpose, some of it attaching to nearby human vessels, strengthening them. The nanites survive even when the ships don't. They're joining other craft, making them stronger. Admiral Crix couldn't believe what he was seeing. His perfect fleet was struggling against these patchwork vessels. 3 Valorian destroyers had already been disabled, and his flagship had taken damage to its propulsion systems. "How is this possible?" he demanded. "Their technology should be years behind ours." Officer Drell checked sensor readings with increasing alarm. "Admiral, we're detecting something unusual. Some kind of microscopic machines are attaching themselves to our ships where the human weapons have damaged the hulls." "What?" Crix moved to the sensor station. "Scan them. They appear to be consuming our hull material," Drell reported, his voice tight with concern. "And they're spreading." A junior officer interrupted with panic in his voice. "Admiral, weapons control on levels 3 through 7 has stopped responding. Something is interfering with our systems." Tom watched on the Phoenix's view screen as a Valorian battlecruiser started drifting, its engines flickering and dying. The ship's sleek hull was developing a gray patch that slowly spread across its surface. "The nanites are boarding their vessels," Ben said with awe in his voice. "Not just boarding," Tom replied. "They're converting, using the Valorians' own technology against them." He opened a channel to Linda. "Doctor, are you seeing this?" "Yes," Linda's voice came through, excitement evident. "The nanites are doing exactly what they were designed to do: adapt, learn, and overcome. They're analyzing Valorian technology and incorporating it into their own structures." As the battle continued, more Valorian ships began showing signs of nanite infection. Their weapons stopped firing. Their engines failed. Some began drifting aimlessly. Others turned and fired upon their own fleet as the nanites gained control of their systems. Admiral Crix watched in horror as his mighty armada started to fall apart around him. Through the viewport of his command bridge, he could see the gray material spreading across his own flagship's hull. "Retreat," he ordered, his voice lacking its usual confidence. "All functioning vessels, retreat immediately." But it was too late for many of the Valorian ships. The nanites had spread too far, infected too many systems. What had begun as a one-sided battle was turning into humanity's most unexpected victory. Tom stood on the Phoenix's bridge, watching as the remaining Valorian ships attempted to flee. "Should we pursue, Captain?" Ben asked. Tom shook his head. "No need. The nanites will finish what we started." He opened a channel to Earth. "United Earth Defense Command, this is Captain Miller. The Valorian fleet is in retreat. Humanity stands." And across the solar system, people who had lived in fear for weeks began to cheer. The recyclers, the garbage collectors, the scrap handlers, the people the Valorians had mocked, had just saved their world. Admiral Crix stood on the bridge of his dying flagship. Gray patches spread across the walls and control panels as the strange human technology consumed his once perfect vessel. Half his bridge crew was dead. The other half worked desperately to keep basic life support functioning. "Admiral," Officer Drell reported, his voice weak, "engines are completely disabled. Weapons systems non-responsive. Communications limited to short range only." Through the viewport, Crix could see the remnants of his mighty fleet. Of the 800 ships he had brought to this system, barely 200 remained functional, and most of those were trying to flee. The rest were either destroyed or drifting, infected by the gray material that seemed to eat through Valorian technology like acid through paper. How? He asked no one in particular. How did primitive garbage collectors defeat the greatest fleet in 12 systems? A human voice answered through the comm system. "Because we aren't primitive, Admiral. We're adaptable." Captain Tom Miller's face appeared on the main screen. The human looked tired but proud. "What is this technology?" Crix demanded. "What is happening to my ships?" Tom's expression was calm. "When you have limited resources, Admiral, you learn not to waste anything. Our garbage isn't primitive. It's the ultimate adaptation. Each piece has been through dozens of iterations, improvements, breakdowns, and repairs." He gestured to someone off-screen, and the image changed to show microscopic robots, the gray material, working together to break down and rebuild Valorian metals. We call them nanites, Tom continued. Tiny machines that can transform materials at the molecular level. Dr. Reed developed them for recycling purposes, but they proved to be much more. This is impossible, Crix insisted. No species could develop such technology before achieving interstellar travel. That's where you're wrong, Tom replied. Your ships are perfect, but rigid. Ours are flawed, but flexible. Your technology depends on abundant resources from conquered worlds. Ours had to make the most of what little we had. On the Phoenix, Tom watched the Valorian flagship drift helplessly. Linda stood beside him, her tablet showing the spread of nanites throughout the alien vessel. They've disabled all weapons and propulsion, she reported. Life support is being maintained. The nanites are learning a tremendous amount about Valorian technology. Tom nodded. Open a channel to all remaining Valorian ships. When the connection was established, he spoke clearly. This is Captain Tom Miller of Earth Defense Fleet. Your admiral's ship has been neutralized. Your fleet is defeated. Stand down and prepare to be boarded, or face the same fate. One by one, the remaining Valorian vessels stopped firing. Some tried to run, but the fastest human ships, those built by nanites specifically for pursuit, caught them easily, attaching themselves to the alien hulls and spreading their nanite infection. Admiral Crix watched his empire's greatest fleet surrender to a species that, just 1 month ago, he had dismissed as primitive scavengers. The humiliation burned inside him, but there was also a grudging respect. I surrender my vessel and my command, he said formally to Tom. The Valorian Empire acknowledges your victory. 2 hours later, Tom and Linda led a boarding party onto the Valorian flagship. They wore protective suits, though Linda assured them the nanites had made the atmosphere safe for humans. Admiral Crix waited for them in what remained of his command center, now half transformed by the gray material. Your machines, they continue to spread, he observed as the humans entered. They're studying your technology, Linda explained. Learning from it. Don't worry, they won't harm living organisms. We programmed them with strict limitations. Crix's compound eyes focused on her. You are their creator. Linda nodded. Dr. Linda Reed. I developed the first nanite colonies for recycling purposes. From garbage collector to conqueror of fleets, Crix said, his translator unable to convey the complex emotions in his voice. Perhaps we misjudged your species. Yes, Tom agreed simply. You did. 3 days later, the United Earth Defense Council met in emergency session. President Lopes sat at the head of the table, with Tom and Linda beside her. On a large screen, Admiral Crix appeared from his temporary quarters on Mars. The terms are acceptable, the Valorian leader stated. The Empire will acknowledge Earth and its solar system as sovereign territory. We will establish diplomatic relations and fair trade agreements. President Lopes nodded. And the other systems you've conquered? Crix's mandibles twitched, a sign of discomfort. We will renegotiate our arrangements with them. Perhaps a more cooperative approach would benefit all parties. After the call ended, Council member Jack Parker shook his head in amazement. From garbage collectors to diplomats in 1 month. Not bad. Linda smiled. The nanites gave us more than just a defensive fleet. The technology they've absorbed from the Valorians will advance human science by decades. Tom added, and the Valorians will spread word of what happened here. No other species will make the mistake of underestimating humans again. President Lopes stood. Dr. Reed, Captain Miller, on behalf of all humanity, I thank you both. Your resourcefulness saved our world. 2 weeks later, Tom stood at the observation deck of the Mars Orbital Recycling Station 7, the same place where he had first met the Valorians. Beside him, Linda watched as a new generation of nanites processed materials from damaged ships, both human and Valorian. What are they building now? Tom asked, watching the gray swarms work. Our future, Linda replied. With what they've learned from Valorian technology, they're designing ships that can travel beyond our solar system. Real starships, Tom, built from what others would call junk. Below them, in a secure laboratory, scientists from Earth worked alongside Valorian engineers who had chosen to stay and learn more about nanotechnology. Admiral Crix had returned to his empire with most of his surviving crew, but he left behind representatives to begin a new chapter in relations between the species. Admiral Crix sent a message before he left, Tom told Linda. He said the Valorian word for recycling will now be earthing, in honor of the species that turned garbage into their salvation. Linda laughed. I guess we'll take that as a compliment. Outside the station viewport, the transformed solar system sparkled with activity. New stations, ships, and technologies bloomed where once there had been only floating junk. Humanity had not only survived, it had transformed itself, much like the nanites had transformed the space debris. You know, Tom said thoughtfully, before all this happened, I used to feel a little embarrassed when visitors saw our recycling operations, like we were just picking through trash while other species built new things. And now? Linda asked. Tom smiled as he watched a gleaming new vessel take shape in the construction bay. Part human ingenuity, part Valorian technology, all made possible by the nanites that had saved Earth. Now I know the truth, he said. One species' garbage is another species' greatest strength. We didn't just survive because of our scrap. We won because of it. In the vastness of space, word spread quickly. Beware the humans of Earth. They may look primitive, they may collect what others discard, but they can turn even their scraps into the mightiest of weapons. And they are coming to the stars.